public hearing Tuesday, November 24th. It's now 6:30, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to ask Director Dias to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, I'd be honored to do that, Madam President. Thank you. Before I do, I would like to ask everyone to mute their microphones and telephones, and please rise, face the flag, and place your right hand over your heart as you repeat with me mutedly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Dias.
My pleasure.
Madam Secretary, roll call vote, please. Or roll call, please. Excuse me.
Thank you, Madam President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 4, Justin Lane.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Division 1, Shelley Sourceable.
Here.
Dwayne Chisholm. Here. Jim Markman.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Item number 4, adoption of agenda. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
This is I'll make a motion. The agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second. Keith.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Robert Paris.
Yes.
Justin Lane.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable.
Yes. Thank you. Item number 5, public comments and period open to the public. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the board on any item regarding the board business that's not on the agenda. So if you'd like to speak in regards to the public hearing, we will have an opportunity to do so in a moment. But anybody else that would like to address the board, now would be the time. Okay, item 5A, voluntary public roll call. If any member of the public on this video conference wishes to identify themselves as present for this meeting, please do so for the record in our minutes.
Yes, this is John Joyce, and reporting for Acton, Aguadulce, Rosemond, and Lake Los Angeles, and wanting to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you and welcome.
Charles Bostwick, representing Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger.
Welcome.
John Ukestead, Antelope Valley United Water Purveyors and White Cliffs Farmers Mutual Water Company.
Welcome, John.
Hi, good evening. This is Russ Bryden from Waterworks Districts 37 and 40.
Welcome.
Hi. Bob Hightower from Shadow Acres Mutual Water Company.
Welcome, Bob.
Chad Reed with Courtsville Water District.
Welcome. Okay. Well, glad to see.
Rosalba Flores with Brown Armstrong.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Rosalba Flores with Brown Armstrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item number 6.
From Rosemont County Service District.
Welcome. Anybody else? Okay, item number 6, new business. Item 6A1, Assistant General Manager Matt Knudsen.
Yes, Madam President, this is Dwayne Chisholm, the General Manager. I'll take this item, provide a staff report. This item is the approval of a grant application for our Cal OES Community Power Resiliency Program. This program came out of the Governor's Office of Emergency Service, and they released an RFP with just right on October 9th. There's a total of $20 million that's available through this grant program with a maximum grant application of $300,000. What was unusual about this particular grant is that it only had a 3-week period with which from when it was announced to when the applications were due. And the applications were due on October 30th, 2020. Avek and the staff didn't realize this grant application was out until we only had about a week to prepare. And recognizing that this grant had some application to the agency, and there was no match that was required for the grant, nor was there a board resolution, which is typically required for such a grant. The agency took a look at the grant criteria, and this has to do with emergency services preparing for the power outages and those types of events. And this is what this money is being allocated for. The agency realized that we could utilize this grant application to possibly purchase 6 diesel tank trailers, 4 that had 960 gallons and 2 that had 460 gallons. And that would assist us in being able to refuel the 6 emergency generators that we have that are placed throughout the service area. What was unique about this, as I mentioned before, was the very short time frame. So I contacted the board president and determined whether the agency should apply for this grant and come to the board following the grant deadline for the proposal. It was agreed upon that we should at least put our grant application in and then allow the board to consider it. And if for some reason the board does not wish to have this grant application filed, we could always rescind it. So with that, that would conclude my staff report. Our recommendation is to recommend approval of the grant application for Cal OES Community Power Resiliency Program. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, this is Director Sourceable. How long will it be before we're notified if we're approved for the grant?
It looks early in first quarter of 2021 is the indication that the OES staff has indicated as to whether we would be awarded such grant.
Okay, and these, as you mentioned, these tanks, they would allow us, they do not cost the agency any money.
Correct. The grant would cover costs. Yeah, the cost or the money received from the grant would allow the agency to purchase the 6 fuel tanks, diesel fuel tanks that would be utilized to refuel our emergency generators during a particular power outage of any length of time. And we can use our regular fleet in order to be able to transport those. So no additional vehicles are necessary to be able to transport these diesel tanks around our service area.
Okay, do any of the directors have any questions?
Madam President, this is Rob. I move approval of Board Order 6A1.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Director Miller. I will second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. Item 7, consent calendar.
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent calendar. This is Keith.
I'll second. Justin.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable.
Yes. Okay, consent calendar passes. Okay, item number 8A. This is the water rates and capacity fee hearing. And I'm calling this hearing to order at 6:41 p.m. And the purpose of this hearing is for the agency to consider adoption of a resolution amending the agency's rules and regulations for the distribution of water of Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency by adopting a 2021 water rate. Next, we're going to have a presentation by Sahir Pardawala, I hope I said that correctly, at Rafatellis Financial Consultants, followed by a staff report from Matt Knutson.
Are you on the line, Sudhir?
Yes, I thought, okay, did you want to introduce the meeting, Matt?
So this is Matt with Avek. I'd like to just, as President Sourcewell mentioned, introduce Sudhir. Sudhir is with Rafatellis Financial Consultants for the last several years. Sudhir and his firm have developed and maintained a financial rate study and model for the agency that looks out long term. I'll let Sudhir go through the presentation. Feel free to stop him at any time if you have any questions as he goes along. And at the end of it, I've got a few things to inform the board about as well.
Good evening, President Sbo, members of the board. This is Sudhir Pardiwal with Rafatellis. And we also have Charles Diamond accompanying me. Charles has been instrumental in developing the model and the rate model, as well as the report and the presentation. I'd like to acknowledge his fantastic work that he has done on this project. So I'm going to start off today with a brief overview of the study and then discuss and review the proposed financial planning options and then the proposed rates. Please feel free to ask questions at any point during the presentation. We don't have to wait till the end of the presentation. Next slide. So Rafatellis has been assisting the district for the last several years with this annual review and update of the rates and the financial plan. And this particular period that we're talking about will the study period starts in January 21 and ends in the end of calendar year 25. In the model that we have developed, there are several important aspects, but essentially it provides you the cash flow projections for the agency over the long term. We review the reserve balance projections and the proposed annual revenue adjustments, which basically shows you how much additional revenue you need to collect to meet your targets in terms of meeting your expenses as well as providing adequate revenue reserves. The updated financial plan is then used to determine the rates for starting in January 21, and we are only looking at implementing rates for the 1 year starting in January 21. Next slide. in order to look at a long-term scenario, we have to make projections for several years. And to make these projections, we need to make certain assumptions regarding growth in accounts, growth in water consumption, changes in revenue projections such as property taxes and any miscellaneous revenue that the agency collects. In addition, we have to make projections for expenses as well. And here are some of the assumptions that we have used in this study to make projections for expenses. For personnel expenses are projected to increase at 4% per year. Utilities and supplies at 5% is typical for basically for power and so forth, chemicals. They are slightly higher than typical inflation rates. Capital projects at the rate of 3%, and then some of the general expenses are projected at 3%. One of the elements that goes in this general category is the cost of state water project expenses. The recent inflationary, in the presentation that we had with the group, with your customer group, there was a comment about the inflation expenses of general inflation expenses of 3% being too high compared to the actual inflation rate right now. And I just want to explain why we use 3% here. Basically, 3% is a long-term inflation rate, so we recognize that the inflation rate currently is less than 2%, but we are basically using a long-term rate for projection purposes. Also, this rate that we are using is little conservative, and we tend to stay a little conservative in this regard when we are projecting expenses, recognizing that there might be potential expenses that might come about that we have not considered in the budgets. And you'll see as we go through the projections, we have in fact modified some of your cost projections to represent more closer to what the actual expenses are going to be. One significant change that we have made is to separate out the state water project revenues, the taxes that we collect, property taxes, and the expenses associated with the state water contract and the Dell conveyance costs that will be coming starting from next year. We've also assumed that all the capital expenses are going to be rate funded and are reserve funded. So we are not planning to issue any additional debt to fund any of the capital expenses. Next slide. One of the important assumptions that we make every year is the amount of water sales. And what we have done slightly differently this year is actually reviewed the sales over the last 10 years. And as you can see, the actual bar charts represent the actual amount of water that is sold every year. And in the last year, it is based on calendar year or for other fiscal year, and the other is a calendar year. The red line shows the average of the 10 years. So in going forward with the projections, what we are doing is basically taking the sales in fiscal year 2020 and projecting that for the future. We are not making any assumptions for increases in sales, so we expect that if there is any growth at all in the entity, in the agency, it will be accommodated through conservation. So even though your budget is based on slightly higher numbers, we are actually using the 42,761 acre feet that you see in fiscal 2020 for making projections going forward. Next slide. I also want to discuss with you some of the changes that we have made to your revenues and other expenses as well. So while most of them are based on your budgets, there are a few exceptions. We just talked about the water sales based on the FY 2020 actuals. The water transfer exchanges are assumed to generate $7 million per year, even though your budget basically is set at $4.7 million per year. Recognizing that the actual FY20 exchange dollars was about $7.8 million. The property tax is set in fiscal year 21 at $32.7 million. The budget for 21 was actually 31.5, but when we looked at the property taxes that you actually got in 2020, worked out with 33.7. So being a little conservative there as well, given the current situation, and reduced the property tax revenues to 32.7. Was done in conjunction with input from the district, from the agency. The cost of water purchase was based on the actual for 2020, the 42,700 acre feet that we spoke about. And lastly, we have some costs associated with Delta Conveyance project. These are costs for planning and environmental aspects. And you can see the numbers basically going up from $2.25 million 2 years to $3.75 million in 2023 and $4 million in 2024. We expect that the planning will last over this time frame, and the actual project, whether it goes further or not, we decided beyond that point, and we haven't included the expenses going beyond 2024. Slide. So the next few slides we are going to show you some, the revenues and expenses. And this first slide here basically shows you, there's a lot of numbers on this slide. It shows you the revenues, assume that there is no increase in your rates or revenue adjustments. And so you can see the first line stays pretty much constant 21 onwards. The water transfer exchanges at $7 million in 21 and onwards. The property tax revenues, $32.7 million in 21, and then increased by 2%, which is the normal increase allowed by the assessor or property taxes. The investment income is actually based on the investment climate. And because the rates are so low right now, we have projected them at the ongoing rates. The one big change that you will see from 2020 is the other revenue. In fiscal year 20, we collected almost $14 million, and this was a one-time receipt of funds from Metropolitan Water District for the High Desert Water Bank project. And so that's the only year that we actually see that big revenue chunk coming in. And after that is basically some miscellaneous revenues that the agency picks up. Out of that, when you compare the totals for fiscal year 20 versus fiscal year 21, there's a big drop in the total revenues because of that one-time receipt of funds from Metropolitan Water District. Then the increase for subsequent years, as you can see, is about 1%. Slide. This slide shows you the operating expenses, given the assumptions that we use for projecting those different expenses. So water purchases are assumed to increase at 3%, delivery and treatment at 3% as well. And most of these expenses are basically increasing at 3% except personnel and power, utility expenses. The state water contract is increasing also at 3% per year, based on the assumption that we have. The bond current debt service is included in the bond interest and payments. Actually, that's a receipt of funds based on your previous bond issue. And then total O&M expenditures, as you can see, there's an increase of 13.1% in fiscal year 21 compared to the previous year. A significant portion of that is related to the increase in the state water contract costs. You will notice that the personal expenses actually dropped down in 21, and that's based on your OPEB requirements, which drops the personnel expense from $9.7 million to 7.7, a savings of $2 million. Okay. This chart basically shows your existing debt service and based on 3 different issues, and stays pretty consistent around $9 million all the way through from 21 to 25, fiscal year 21-25. This includes both principal and interest payments. Right? This slide shows you your capital improvement program over the next 5 years, and there are some major expenses here. You have the West Side Water, 5th from the top is West Side Water Bank, which we are planning to spend about little over $4.5 million in 22. And then the third line or the fourth line from the bottom is the SNP Phase 2 construction project, which is about $27 million. And I think maybe staff have some comments regarding this particular slide.
Yes, this is General Manager Chisholm. And what I wanted to point out here is the SNP line is very crucial to the agency and to the agency's ability to utilize the water that we have stored in the West Side Water Bank. We've had a couple of very wet years where we've been able to get a considerable amount of water supply in the West Side Water Bank. However, because of not having this connection between 80th and H and the Quartz Hill plant, we are unable to utilize that volume of water that we have in the water bank to meet peak needs during the summertime. And what that means is that we need to maintain a 15 to 20,000 acre feet supply in San Luis Reservoir. And so that does have a limiting factor as far as our ability to drought-proof ourselves and also to be able to generate additional outside water transfers revenue. And the SNP line will really make the agency much more resilient to respond to any kind of shortcomings in the water supply on a long-term basis, and also ultimately will assist the agency in being able to keep our rates lower, because those additional supplies that are in San Luis Reservoir could be potentially sold to other outside agencies, therefore reducing the need for that revenue from our current customers.
This basically is a graphical presentation of the capital improvement program. Typically, your O&M, there's a gradual change in the O&M. As you can see on this slide, you do see variations in capital expense going from year to year, with a pretty big increase in 22 and then a drop off in the last year at $5 million. So it kind of gives you a perspective of the amount of capital expenses that occur from year to year. Okay. One of the elements that goes into a rate study and a financial plan is the financial policies. The agency has, there are 2 elements that go in here. One is the debt coverage. You always want to make sure that you meet the minimum debt coverage and strive to meet your targeted debt coverage. The other one is reserve policy, which basically provides for good ratings in case of we need to borrow money, and also provide for risk management of the agencies in case of emergencies and so forth. And so let's talk about debt coverage. The agency has a target ratio of 1.75, and we try to meet that debt coverage as we go through the financial plan to ensure that we meet that the agency's goal. The other one is a reserve policy, and before this, until now, we had a minimum reserve level of 200% of the annual operating expenses, including depreciation, which would have approximated about $69 million in fiscal year 2021. But there has been a change and the board has set up some new reserves, and we will go to that on the next slide. So we now have several reserves that we need to track, and these are listed here: the operating reserve, drought contingency reserve, the capital improvement and replacement reserve, the state water project contract reserve, and post-employment benefit liability reserve. Each one of this has a minimum and a maximum target. We've also identified the amounts associated with each. So the operating reserve, we're looking at the minimum and max is the same, 12 months annual budgeted operating expenses. The drought contingency reserve, minimum is set at 7% and the maximum at 3% of the annual budgeted water sales revenue. The capital reserve is set at minimum of 1 year of capital expense and total of 5 years maximum reserve for capital expenses. The state water project contract reserve minimum is set at 50% of the annual budgeted costs for state water, and maximum is at 100% of the annual budgeted state water project cost. And the post-employment benefit liability reserve is set at the amount that we currently have, the extent of the current liability at about $11.4 million. So when we add up all the minimums and all the maximums, our reserve should be somewhere between $64 to $131 million. And we'll go through some of these reserves once we set up our financial plan scenarios. Next slide. So we have proposed 3 alternatives here for the board's consideration. The first alternative, or scenario 1, is doing the 7.5%, implementing 7.5% rate increase in 21 and followed by 7.5% each year. The second scenario also does 7.5% in 21, followed by the 7.5% in 22, and then 5% for the next 3 years. And in the third scenario, we've set the rates at 5 cents per year. Part of the reason we are looking at these different scenarios is given the current COVID situation, agencies are experiencing some financial stress, and therefore we have identified some options available to the board to look at different scenarios. Under each of these scenarios, we meet the target debt coverage. So it's important to understand that all of these provide adequate coverage for our policy debt coverage ratio. And the end balances are shown. We'll show you the ending balances under all 3 scenarios. They're shown in 2 different ways. The total combined reserve. So we had the maximum and the minimum for the combined reserve. So we'll show you that. And then we'll group them in the state water project reserve and all reserves, which includes the operating drought, capital, and post-employment benefit reserve. So we'll show you 3 different reserve charts, basically. Combined reserve, as well as the state water project reserve and all other reserves. Okay. The first scenario that we have is the 7.5% each year, and explain the different charts that we have here. On the left-hand side, we have the state water contract reserve, and you can see the balance in the reserve is represented by the bars, and the targets, minimum target represented by the brown or red line, and the maximum target represented by the blue line. We are gradually building up this reserve since we are starting with it this particular year, and by the end of the fourth year, actually, we exceed the minimum, and because we don't have any delta conveyance costs in that FY25, we see projecting above the minimum level there. All other reserves, again, we start out FY21 at a level above the maximum there, and then draw down the reserves as we incur the higher costs associated with the FY22 capital program. As you can see, that reserve drops consistently from every year except the last year where we don't have the delta conveyance costs. And then on the right-hand side, we show you the total reserve with the minimum line and the maximum line. The minimum is the higher the sum of all the minimums or times the annual operating cost per the policy of the board. And the maximum line is represented by the blue line. And as you can see, we have at the end of 5 years under this program, we will have $126 million in your combined reserve total. Slide. This particular slide shows you the same three scenarios, the same three reserve charts under the second scenario, which is 7.5% for 2 years and then 5% for the subsequent years. So when you look at the fifth year total under this program, you would see that the reserve drops from the $126 million to $122 million. That's a drop of about just over a little over $4 million in the reserves by going to a smaller rate increase for the last 3 years. Okay, next slide. This is the third scenario that we have shown where we are looking at 5% revenue adjustments per year. And this particular case, as you can see, the reserve level drops down further. The combined reserve drops down from the first scenario, 126 million. The second scenario was 122 million, and this one is 115 million. So it's about $11 million short of the first scenario, and about $6 or $7 million short of the second scenario. Okay. The next few charts show you the financial plan, which basically just shows you how the expenses and the revenues of the district and how the capital program is being funded. So the bar that you see, the green bar represents the operating expenses. The orange bar represents the debt service cost, principal and interest. And then the blue bar, the topmost bar, represents your rate funded CIP. The lines that you see are the blue lines, which are the revenues under the current rates without any revenue adjustments. And the red line shows you the revenues under proposed revenue adjustments. In this particular scenario, we were looking at 7.5% increases per year. The cross-check bar that you see on each of the first 4 years basically represents the difference between the lines and the top of the bars. So that is the amount of capital expenses that need to be funded through reserves. And you saw the reserves dropping every year as a result of this funding the capital expenses through your reserves. In the last year, as I said, because we don't have the delta conveyance costs, we are setting aside some additional money in the reserves under the scenario. Okay. This next scenario shows you the 7.5% for the 2 years and 5% for the subsequent years. So in particular scenario, we will be drawing down the reserves more in last 3 years. And you can see specifically in FY25, the size of the amount of cash they're able to set aside is much smaller than what you saw under scenario 1. And this is the last scenario where we are projecting at the rate at 5% revenue adjustments per year. And obviously the reserves are being drawn down further. And you can see again in the last year, we are really setting aside any money in the reserves. Next slide. So to summarize the revenue program, an important element of the program is the CIP. Right now we have $61.6 million budgeted that will be all funded through rates and reserves. Under scenario 1, we are projecting 7.5% increases per year with ending reserve balance after 5 years at $126 million. On scenario 3, which is the 5% per year, the reserve balance is $115.9 million, which is a reduction of slightly over $11 million over scenario 1. And the intermediate one, we discussed that as well. That doesn't change the rates for the first, but it does make an impact for the ultimate reserves after 5 years. Under all 3 scenarios or scenarios shown here, we do meet coverage. And under scenario 3, as we said, we have a reduction in reserves of about $10.6 million. So this is the last slide, I believe, and it shows you the rates that we are proposing under the different scenarios. The first column shows you current rates in the current year, calendar year 2020. In scenarios 1 and 2 with a 7.5% revenue adjustment, you see the rates in column 2. And then under the last scenario, 5% increase, you see the rates in column 3. The treated water rate would increase currently from 648 to, if you go under the first scenarios, to 697. There's a third scenario to 681. These are basically percentage increases based on the current rates that we have proposed, that we currently have. So the treated water rate that you see, 67, for example, under scenario 1 and 2 is 7.5% higher than this 48. Similarly, all the rates basically are across the board rate increases based on the current rates. And we have summarized some of these rates. We have the treated water rate, the untreated water rate for M&I customers, and we have for ag untreated water and ag water delivered under service agreements, treated water and untreated water. We have the cost rates for Mojave Water Agency, and then the rate for Edwards Air Force Base, the main base, and Phillips Lab. Those are based on agreements, and then the Acton service area rate. And that basically concludes my presentation. Be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Sudhir. This is Matt with Avek. I would like to just give the board a little more history. LA County Waterworks, Shadow Acres Mutual Water Company, Cal Water, Tejon Ranch, and Palm Ranch Irrigation District. So we did receive several comments during that customer meeting. Those are summarized in your board packet. Following the meeting and prior to the board agenda going out, we received written comments from Tejon Ranch and Shadow Acres Mutual Water Company. Those written comments are on page 50 and 51 of your board packet. And then also prior to this public hearing this evening, we received written comments from LA County Waterworks Districts 37 and 40. And we also received earlier this evening a written comment from Supervisor Catherine Barger office for the 5th District. So you should have received, each board member should have received those written comments sent by General Manager Chisholm. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have. If there are none, then it may be appropriate time to open up the public hearing for the public.
Yes, at this time we will take public statements. Is there anybody?
Madam President, this is... Oh, I'm sorry, Madam President, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please, Chad.
Okay, this is Chad Reed with Quartzville Water District, and I just wanted to kind of go over a few of the numbers and a few of the concerns that have been expressed by some of our board members. And as I went through this presentation, in which I really appreciated staff making the slides available and going through this on a kind of a more intimate detail slide by slide, one of the things that I saw that came out that started becoming very apparent is we're maxing out those reserves very fast. And in the current circumstances and in the current conditions that are going on out there, I don't think this is necessarily the most prudent thing for Antelope Valley's current at this point. For example, and I have different numbers than you guys do on your slides, so I do apologize, but there was a slide that's provided to us called no revenue adjustment. And as we went through that and we looked at the upper bounds or the top end of the reserves, we started seeing that we start getting very close to maxing out those reserves in that first year. I understand that there's some unique caveats in 2020 with regards to that $13 million. I understand that there are some different things there. However, when we do the basic math on that last slide, we see a surplus of almost $18 million that would be going forth to those reserves. And when I did that, it just made me think this is not the time to be doing something like a 7.5% increase. At this point, we've seen 7.5% for many years, and it's a very aggressive capital improvement plan. The CIP is very aggressive. One of the other concerns that we had with this is how fast projects are being realized. And what I mean by that is, for example, when I looked at the SNP project, and all roughly $27 million is being realized over 3 years versus spreading this out over a little bit longer period, it's a little bit, in my opinion, too aggressive. And when I've looked at other budgets and I've looked at other rate analysis, it seems like such a short window to realize something of this magnitude. It would be like us in a private business going and saying, I'm going to realize all my depreciation within the first 6 months of doing something. Typically, that's not done because there's not enough assets in the business during that first 6 months. So it was something that when we looked at this, we thought we appreciate the work that has been done. However, this is not the time to be doing a 7.5. And we felt like some of these projects should have been spread over more years as far as the funding source goes. We understand the construction needs to be done. However, to kind of pay yourself back the loan that you would take, and I use the word loan here loosely, but to take reserves and spend them is, in my opinion, not the correct way that this should be being done. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your comments, Chad.
This is Charles Bostwick with Supervisor Barger's office. May I speak?
Yes, please.
Good evening, President Sorsabal and board members. I am here tonight representing Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger. As Mr. Knudsen mentioned, Supervisor Barger has sent a letter to you expressing her concern with the IVEC's proposed rate increases and asking the board to forego, reduce, or postpone the increases. I was asked to speak tonight to reiterate the supervisor's concern. This rate increase is proposed while the Antelope Valley and the United States are gripped by the economic pain brought on by the global COVID-19 pandemic. The Los Angeles County Waterworks districts are AVEC's single largest purchaser of water. thousands of Waterworks customers already are delinquent in their accounts because of their individual financial situations. Supervisor Barger asked you to reconsider the rate increases that are proposed in light of the pandemic's financial devastation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Madam President, this is Russ Bryden from the Waterworks Districts. May I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to start my comments, and they'll be brief, by thanking your board and thanking Dwayne and the Avek staff for your partnership with the Waterworks Districts over the years. This is Thanksgiving, and I'm thankful to be working with your team to plan and deliver the water needs for much of the valley. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I'm here tonight on behalf of the Waterworks Districts, specifically District 37, that's Acton, and 40 represents the Greater Antelope Valley, to again express our concern with customers' ability to absorb the 7.5% increase in water rates. So we all know that COVID-19 has been an absolute wrecking ball to the economy. The economic turndown is leading to a significant increase, not decrease, but increase in the delinquency rate of our customer accounts. In Districts 37 and 40, approximately 1,700 accounts have reached delinquency status. This is a huge deal for us. These accounts owe a combined $775,000, and these numbers continue to rise each month, and economic recovery just appears to be months and months away. I'm not sure when things will stabilize. So here's some interesting information. The Waterworks Districts usually or generally carry a fund balance equivalent to about only 25% of our annual O&M costs, only 25%. So our margin is pretty thin. We don't have much cushion there. So based on Raftelis's report, it looks like Avek utilizes a much more conservative approach than the Waterworks Districts, and it provides you a very healthy fund balance. I'm quite jealous of that. So my comment for you is, in light of the economic downturn, as Chuck shared, and your projected healthy fund balance, on behalf of our district's customers, we request that your board do consider foregoing, reducing, or postponing the proposed water rate increase. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Russ, for your comments. Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay. Moving on.
What about the board?
Yeah, I'm moving on to you now.
Okay.
Now would be the time that any of the Water Rates Committee members or any other board members would like to make a comment.
Madam President, this is Director Dias. May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I'd like to point out that, as we heard earlier, a significant component of the proposed rate increase is required to prepare the agency to meet the major expenses associated with the DWR Delta Conveyance Project, which we'll be discussing later tonight under Agenda Item 8C. Thank you. No more comments.
Director Donato.
I want to thank Russ and the committee for spending a lot of time on this. Just one thing that something's missing, and none of you even brought it up. You know what? I would consider freezing them for 1 year. I don't have a problem. If you guys get on the phone tomorrow and you tell Knutson to freeze our $3 million check for the single tower, that's our problem. That's something this agency never, ever, ever was included when this thing was built in the 70s. So somebody needs to get on the bandwagon here and work with us. If you can get him to delay our $3 million check, by the way, guys, he's just taking it. So guess what? We got to make it up somewhere. I have to make that money up somewhere. And guess what? It's not this year. It's $3 million for the next 4 years. That is if their engineering schematics are correct and it doesn't go up. So that's what the problem is right now. I don't think anybody on our board, I don't think anybody on our staff, I think we'd all love to work together and kind of, make this thing happen, but we got a problem. Our problem is this governor just snaps his fingers and he doesn't care. And that's the end of it. So you need to take that back to the boards and to the committee, and somebody needs to give them a call and say, hey, due to the pandemic. Now, see, I believe it's a good an opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to do that because everybody knows about the coronavirus, and I think everybody would like to chip in for 1 year. But nobody's asking AVAC what they can do for them. That's the key. What can you do for AVAC so we can gradually get the money back to pay Newsom $3 million? That's what this is all about, guys. That's it. Pretty simple.
Thank you, Director Donato. Any other directors who wish to speak?
Madam President, this is Rob, and I want to thank Chad and Charles and Russ for their comments. And I've read Catherine Barter's letter to the board, and I do agree that COVID is creating a huge financial problem for the residents of our valley and our taxpayers. And I believe that we should do whatever is possible to reduce our rate increase this year.
Thank you, Director Paris. Anyone else like to speak?
Shelley, this is Justin.
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I dealing with our business and seeing the economic impact that's been seen around the valley, and seeing all these different presentations and hearing from the community and our customers, I do agree with Rob that this year, we should definitely try and do whatever we can to reduce the increase or postpone it to next year. Obviously, we can't do that in the long term, but this is an extraordinary year, and we do have quite a bit of input from other people. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, this is Director Sorsable, and I have a couple of questions for staff. I just would like for you to check my numbers with me. We're currently charging $648 for residential treated water per acre foot, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and if we increase it 7.5%, that's the $697 per acre foot, which is a $49 difference for each acre foot. How many acre feet does a residential household use per year, approximately?
I would say my best guess would be about 3/4 of a acre foot. Typical.
Okay, so that increase of $49 per acre foot, if a residential home uses 3/4 of an acre per household, that's $36.75 per year. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right.
Okay, so that's only about $3 a month. And I think even with COVID-19 hasn't made residential water delivery any less important. And we have responsibility at AVAC to maintain and ensure our ability to supply safe and reliable water to our residents. And this Delta conveyance that Director Donato spoke of is what's throwing our numbers out of whack, because we are going to have to pay $2.25 million this year that we don't have a choice on paying. We don't want to pay that $2.25 million, but to ensure that you and your customers have the water delivered to their sink, this is what we have to do. Otherwise, we could have critical shortages in the future. And the time to plan for these things, unfortunately, is now, because we're talking a lot of money. So those are my comments. Any other comments? Yes.
Madam President, can you take another question from the public?
I'll have to ask my attorney. Mr. Markman?
So, Shelley, normally somebody wants to pose a question when they testify, they can pose the question, and then it can be answered by the staff or the board. But back and forth, like cross-examination or question and answer, is not appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry whoever asked that question. Okay, I guess at this point, we'll close the public hearing unless we have any other comments from our directors. Okay, well then moving on to item 8A2. Director Van Dam, would you like to take over now for the Water Rates and Capacity Fees Committee? Gary? Well, let's go ahead and move.
Yeah,
okay,
yes.
Go ahead, Gary.
I'm here. Yeah. Joanne Chisholm, go ahead and take over on that, please, General Manager.
Yes, with regards to the resolution or the board order before you, the board needs to set a rate, whether for the 2021 through a motion and approval by the board members, and that can be at any one of the rates that have been established and gone through the discussion here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a dollar, there's not an amount on the resolution before us?
Yes, Director Coachbull, this is Matt. So on page 48 of your agenda packet is the proposed resolution number R20-20. And within that resolution, under the first action, it does include 7.5%.
Okay, that's what I thought.
2021, and attached to the resolution is a fee schedule or water rate schedule for 2021, showing what the dollar amount for each of the rates per acre foot would be at 7.5%. So if the board chooses to vote and approve a different percentage, we will include that percentage in the resolution and update the fee schedule accordingly.
Okay, but if I have a motion to adopt resolution number R20-20, it would be as written at the 7.5.
Correct, unless the motion calls for a different percentage.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to make it clear to everybody.
Yeah.
I will make a motion that we approve resolution number R20-20 as prepared. Thank you.
I'll second. Frank.
Any discussion?
Madam President, this is Rob. I move we amend the motion by reducing the 7.5% to 2.5%.
Well, Mr. Markman, can you please advise me on this?
Yes, actually, the motion to amend the original motion should be considered first, see if there's a second, and then voted on. And
Thank
then if it fails, you go back to the original motion. If it passes, that's the action.
This is Director Van Dam. I'd like to second Rob's amended motion.
Okay, so we need to vote on the first motion, which has a second.
The first vote will be on whether to amend the original motion. So the first vote would be whether to amend as Rob suggested.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote on the amended R-20-20 to what was it exactly your amendment? I'm sorry.
Is to amend the original motion to go down to 2.5% instead of 7.5%. If that passes, then you still have to vote to adopt the resolution as amended.
Okay.
This is Director Lane. Is Rob? Could you clarify? Is that 2.5% over the 5 years, or is that for the next year with going back up to a 7.5%?
Justin, this is Rob. The resolution, as I read it, only has for calendar year 2021. So my amendment would only be to reduce it to 2.5% for the calendar year 2021. And then I would imagine we're going to revisit this next year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or clarifications? Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
No.
Keith Dias,
No.
Kelly Sourceable.
No.
So you still have one more motion, it would be to adopt the amended motion.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adopt?
Which would be to adopt resolution R20-20 as amended by Rob's motion.
But I need a new motion for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Jim?
No. Oh, okay. So
the motion to amend has passed. So now the question before the board is to adopt the motion as amended.
Yes, right. That's what I was trying to say. Yes. It takes a second motion.
Correct. We don't do a second motion. It's just to adopt the motion.
We just vote on it?
To adopt the motion to approve R2020, approving the 2021 water delivery.
Okay, okay, so Rob, you had a motion to amend the original motion. That passed. We still don't have a motion to adopt the resolution as amended. That's all I'm saying.
That's the question before the board right now. You don't do a new motion. It's already, the motion to amend has already passed. Now we vote on the motion as amended.
Right, that's what he said.
That's right. Okay, we're on the same page. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we don't need a new motion.
No, you need another vote.
Correct.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
I don't know. I don't want to say no.
Keith Dias,
No.
Kelly Sourceable.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. This is all very important to all of us, and we're doing the best we can. Okay, item 8B1, Finance Committee, Director Donato.
Hang on. So far. Where's my?
It's our presentation for our audit.
Oh, here we go. Okay, well, we went through this thoroughly. I think everybody has as well. It was a 2019-2020 audit report, and now we have to adopt it after we've reviewed it. And if you have any questions or found any corrections, please let us know now.
Madam President, this is Matt. I'd like to introduce Rosalva Flores with Brown Armstrong, that's here this evening. And as Director Donato mentioned, this audit for fiscal year 2019/2020 was presented to the Finance Committee on November 9th. They went through this in detail with the committee. The committee had a lot of good questions for the auditor, but they are here this evening to give a brief overview of the audit contained in your board packet beginning on page 80.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. I am the partner responsible for accounting and auditing services to your agency. And as was stated, we have concluded our audit procedures. We actually have already issued our audit opinions. And I'm pleased to go over the results of the audit of your June 30, 2020 financial statements and answer any questions you may have. And as was stated, I also presented the reports to the Finance Committee. These were in draft format. We did discuss the scope of services in detail, and then subsequent to that meeting, the audit reports were issued in final form. So again, just because we've already went through these in pretty good detail, I'm just going to kind of go over directly into the audit opinions. But again, feel free to stop me at any time. So as was stated on page 80 of the packets is our first letter. This is our required communication letter. And this is basically a letter that's required by professional standards because we communicate with your management as we're conducting the audit, and we don't necessarily have the opportunity to communicate to you. So as part of our audit procedures and as part of the delivery of our reports, we are required to provide to you significant matters as they relate to the audit and provide those to you in this written letter. So just as an example, some of the items that we would be required to report to you would be, for instance, if we had any disagreements with your management regarding the application of accounting standards, if we implemented any new accounting standards, whether they had an impact or not, if there were any audit adjustments that were proposed by us, or also even if we found any audit adjustments that were considered trivial and not posted to the financial records. So I just have two items that I want to report to you that are summarized in this letter. The first one was there was an implementation of a new accounting standard, and that was Government Accounting Standards number 95. All that was the allowing you to defer the implementation of certain standards that would have otherwise been applicable to the fiscal year 2020 audit. Because of the pandemic, the GASB actually issued that to provide you with additional time to be able to implement the standards. So again, it wasn't anything that changed anything in your financial statements. It just basically allowed you additional time to implement standards. And then the second item that I wanted to communicate to you was we did have a couple of proposed audit adjustments. These are actually attached to this letter on page 83. And these were considered a correction of an error that resulted in prior period adjustments. And so the first one was related to your retiree healthcare benefits, also called other post-employment benefits. And what we found was, as we were reviewing the actuary valuation report from the prior year, was that there was an overstatement of pension expense, and so we made that correction. And then the second was a correction to accounts payable for bank water that actually pertained to prior years, so that also was corrected and reflected in your June 30 financial statements. If you look at your notes to the financial statements, note 16 also describes these two adjustments. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and have you go to the beginning of page 84. This is the financial statements that we issue. I do want to mention before I go over the audit opinions that every year when you publish these financial statements, you're basically asserting to the users that this information is accurate and fairly presented in accordance with all applicable standards. So it is our responsibility as independent auditors to perform an independent audit and render an opinion to assert to the users that management's assertion is in fact accurate. So once we are able to satisfy ourselves with the information that we have reviewed and obtained, then we are able to provide you with an opinion. So if you turn to page 88 of the financial statements, you're going to find the main opinion on the financials. And I'm very pleased to report that we were very satisfied with the information that was provided, and we have issued an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. So congratulations on that. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to have you now turn to our next report, and that's on page 128. It's our yellow book report. So anytime that we conduct a government type audit such as yours, in addition to our normal procedures, we're also required to follow government auditing standards, which are also known as the yellow book. And so as we're looking at your procedures and practices on each of the significant audit areas, we are required to provide you with any material weaknesses that we might identify or significant deficiencies to you in this letter. And then also we are required to report to you if your agency did not comply with any laws and regulations. So I'm happy to report that we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, and we did not find any instances in which your agency did not comply with its laws and regulations. So congratulations on that as well. That's it on the audit opinions that we've issued. I just want to take this time to express my appreciation to all the members of management for the help with the audit. I want to note that this year was not only a first-year audit with a new audit firm, but we also perform all of our audit procedures remotely. We obviously do ask for a lot of information in 1 week, and everything went very well and very smooth. So I thank all of management for their help with the audit. And that concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving on to item 8B2, consideration to accept and file the audit.
Madam President, we do have a board order AB2 for to consider and accept and file the audit report.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So do we have a motion to adopt board order 8B2 and
I'll make
accept
a
the
motion.
financial report?
I'll make a motion. We approve board order 8B2.
I second it. This is Frank.
Any questions? Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Wayne,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Ellie Sourceable.
Yes. Back to you, Director Donato, 8B3.
Okay. Where is mine? There we go. Trying to get the agenda up, but I don't know why I'm not having any luck.
I might give you a little hand there, Director Donato. We have two items, AB3 and AB4. Their consideration for approval of a purchase order for elite concrete restoration for the replacement and expansion of joint sealant at the Quartz Hill water treatment plant for $27,300, and operations manager Brozigian will provide the staff report.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay, good evening, directors. I'll be presenting two items from the approved 2020-2021 asset replacement budget. Both of these items were budgeted, and I'm happy to say both came in under budget. First item, BIR 21-01, had a budget of $40,000, and this is a replacement of about 2,000 linear feet of expansion joint sealant in clarifiers number 2 and number 5 at the Quartz Hill treatment plant. It's about 40 years old, this sealant, and for the directors, further understanding, when you pour large areas of concrete, you have to leave a gap in between the panels, and that gap is filled with the sealant that allows for expansion and contraction during curing. A lot of this material over the course of the last 12 years at the agency has been replaced. What happens is when this sealant starts cracking and pulling away, water can undermine the concrete structure, and then bad things usually happen. So we're pretty much ahead of the game on this. We put out a scope of work and an RFP to 3 different contractors. One of the contractors, when they found out it was a confined space, and also, of course, it's what's the other term? Prevailing wage. Yeah, they get nervous sometimes on prevailing wage because their employees get excited about that extra money. Anyway, so the confined space scared the one contractor off, and the other contractor submitted a bid that I wouldn't even put down for you because it was so high, it was ridiculous. Public works contracts right now are multiple. Contractors are very busy, and this contractor said, we're really busy, but we'd be happy to come for this price. So we went to our go-to contractor that's done this for about the last 12 years, Elite Concrete, and they turned in a proposal that was pretty close to what they proposed last year for the same amount of work in a different area. They proposed to do this job for $27,300. That's $12,700 under budget, and they will be able to do this job in December when we need it done. So I would ask that the board support a proposal from Elite Concrete for $27,300.
Okay, do you have any questions? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve item 8B3.
I'll second it. It's Frank.
Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Shelley Sorsable.
Yes. Board Order B83 passes. Thank you.
All right,
Go ahead, Mr. Bozigian.
Thank you. The last item is PR 21-03, and it has a budget of $110,000. This is a replacement of 6 20-inch submerged butterfly valves at the Courtsville treatment plant. All of our filter effluent valves are submerged. We've replaced half a dozen over the last few years, and this year we're targeting 6 valves that are leaking. We are going to shut the plant down in January, the first week of January, to do our annual maintenance, which means draining the plant. So we contacted 2 contractors that we felt could meet this time frame and do this work. Bowie Contractors, that's done a lot of work for Avek in the past, and R&B Automation, that's done quite a bit of work, valve and automation work for Courtsville, or for the agency in the last 20 plus years. So this is a very time-sensitive job, very difficult. Having the valve certainly is a little bit problematic these days. Bowie Contractors was able to meet all the criteria, and they turned in a bid of $101,600. R&B Automation turned in a bid of $87,690.16. They're both good contractors. We would recommend going with R&B Automation, as they've done this work before. They do have the valves in stock. And one more little idiosyncrasy to this job is that the current valve shaft size is different than it was 40 years ago. So stainless steel adapters have to be machined and installed. And R&B does have their own in-house machine shop. So they will be able to perform this in the time allotted. There's a 4-day window to get this job done. So with that being said, we're $22,309 under budget. So we would recommend approval of the automation in the amount of $87,690.16.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have any questions for John? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept 8B4?
This is Justin. I move that we accept item 8B4.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion. This is Keith.
Thank you, Keith. Any additional questions? Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Ellie Sorsable.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Board Order 8B4 passes. Item 8C, Delta Conveyance and Negotiation Committee. Director Dias.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The Delta Conveyance and Negotiation Committee met last Thursday to discuss the items that you see in your agenda packet as resolution number R-20-23, consisting of number 1, authorizing a level of participation in the Delta Conveyance Project. Number 2, authorizing the general manager to enter a funding agreement with DWR for environmental planning costs only. Item 3, approval of amendments to Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority Joint Powers. And number 4, determine the actions that are exempt from CEQA. But it also authorizes the general manager to execute an MOU regarding Class 8 member agencies' election procedures. And I believe our staff has the same presentation, excellent presentation they gave us last Thursday that very clearly identifies the situation. Dwayne?
Yes, thank you, Director Dias. There was a considerable write-up that was contained in the staff report on the various items. I will provide a executive summary here for the board members and also the public. And so the first question you have to ask yourself is why participate in the conveyance project? And the simple answer is it comes down to reliability. As the board members all know, that the actual reliability of the State Water Project has reduced over the years and significantly since 2008. And as such, we're anticipating that we're looking at a 45% or in general range of reliability without the conveyance project. And so that type of reliability only allows the agency to have about 65,000 acre feet on an ongoing long-term basis. This just simply isn't acceptable for us to meet our needs long-term. So when you look at it with the conveyance project, the long-term reliability and the yield is anticipated to increase to approximately 60%, which gets us closer to our long-term projected demand for imported water of approximately 90,000 acre feet. So that's the purpose and the reason for the agency to consider being part of this project and moving forward with it, is that long-term reliability figure. To give you an idea of what the project is all about, it's a single tunnel project that this area here is the Sacramento, South Sacramento region. And the project has 2 intakes, 1 or 2. They're analyzing 3 different locations for the 2 intakes that will be part of the project. And then they're analyzing 2 corridors, the central corridor, which is indicated here in kind of the gold color, and then the eastern corridor, which is in the purple location. Each one of those ends up at the Banks and Jones pumping plant and is a single tunnel approximately 38 feet in diameter that traverses under the delta. As you all know, there was a previous project which was twin tunnels that DWR has abandoned because of Governor Newsom's initial non-support for that project, but he did indicate that he would support a single tunnel option, and so DWR, at the direction of the governor's office, has proposed this project. This is a brand new project. They're starting all over, and they have to get new environmental and planning documents. So the funding for this project is coming from the project participants. It's not coming from any other place within the state budget. And it's a phased approach where you have funding for the planning and environmental work done first, and then funding for the construction aspect of the project. So AVEC's financial commitment for the first 4 years of the project is $12,172,096. And that would be our contribution to be able to do all the environmental work and analysis and provide a preliminary engineering report from which cost estimates and benefits can be more clearly defined. AVEC's project percentage, as far as the project goes, is 3.95%. And there is an opt-out provision now for those that have no interest in the project moving forward. So the agency has the opportunity to opt out now if it so wishes to do so. But of the state water contractors, these are the agencies that are participating in the project. You can see that all of these agencies are south of the Delta. The ones with a star on them have already approved moving forward with the project. Their boards have. AVEC tonight will be considering this measure. Also concurrently, Crestline Arrowhead is considering this, and then Metropolitan Water District will be considering the project in the first week of December. The agencies that are opting out of the project are the Central Coast Water Authority, the Tulare Basin Water District, the County of Kings, Oak Flat, Little Rock, and the 4 county water districts or water agencies that are north of the Delta. So the only real urban district that's there is the Central Coast Water Authority. All the others are primarily agricultural, or very small agricultural districts. It's the cost of the project. They have a very preliminary estimate, and because they do not have a completed engineering project report, but they're anticipating this estimate about $15 billion. And Metropolitan Water District is anticipated to pay approximately 65% of those costs. And as I mentioned previously, AVEC's share is 3.95%. It is important to note that in the 4 or 5 year period that it will take to complete the environmental document and also the preliminary engineering report, the agency and all of the participants will be in a much better position as to whether to determine whether they should proceed with the construction phase of the project, where the more significant costs are going to incur. This is kind of the project schedule. You can see you're going to get an EIR, EIS, and so you can see that you've got a public review and a final that goes out all the way out here to 2023. And then here's some of the other environmental processes that will be occurring during the same periods. You know, we'll get biological assessments, incidental take permits, biological opinions, water rights, Delta plan consistency. All of these types of permits will be applied for and try to get achieved by 2024, at which time there will be a request to for that second phase of funding associated with the construction of the project. And we'll have a very good idea at that particular point as to what the benefits are and what the ultimate long-term costs would be. As far as the DCA governance changes are, the summary of what's contained within the amendment to the DCA agreement, and DCA stands for the Delta Construction Authority. And so this is the agency that's been formed to do the engineering and to do the contract administration for DWR, and really allows the project to be built in a cost-effective manner. And they have a board of directors. Currently, it's made up of 5 board members, and this was early on, back in, close to 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, when this DCA Joint Powers Authority was created. Avek approved our participation in the DCA back in would be 2018, I guess, during that period. And so, but what the amendment basically does is expands from 5 seats on the board to 7. And what it does is it really adds 2 at-large seats for Class 8 members. And Avek is part of the Class 8 group, which corresponds to the East Branch of the State Water Project. The other classes have to do with the Central Branch and the Bay Area branches and so forth. So what you have is you have 1 seat for the Class 2 members, except for Santa Clara, and you got 1 seat for a combination of Class 5, Class 3, Class 5, and Class 7. There is a lot less members in those classes, so that's why they only have 1 seat, whereas Class 8 members, we have close to 8 or 9 agencies within our class. Metropolitan District will still have a permanent seat on the board, along with Kern County Water Agency and Santa Clara Valley Water District. So you'll have a 7-member board. The only other aspect of note within the DCA government changes that's included in the amendment is a 50% reconsideration for a particular budgetary item. And in essence, what this is, because Metropolitan Water District is supplying 65% of the funding, they were concerned that a board of 7 members, where you have 1 member, 1 vote, that you could have a very small percentage of the participants dictating what the costs are for some of the larger participants. So with Metropolitans can reconsider an item as long as they have close to 70% of the total population participation. So they'll need at least 1 or 2 of the other state water participants in order to be able to, they can't do it on their own, that would need to agree with them. And then that item gets reconsidered based on the percentage of participation. And then finally, all the officers are selected by the board. So that's the DCA government changes that's contained in the amendment. That's described in greater detail in the staff report. Finally, because we have 2 seats on the DCA board, and we have 8 agencies that are part of the Class 8 organization, that we needed to have a procedure for how to select those directors and the alternates for the DCA board. And an MOU was crafted, and it's explained in the staff report in greater detail as to how those directors are selected. There's a revolving program, so that at some point or another, everyone will have the opportunity to be on the DCA board during the course of the project, which is anticipated to be 20 to 25 years if the construction process moves forward. Oop, I got pushed the wrong button. I don't know how I do that. There we go. So in summary, in order to stay in the project until the planning and environmental is complete and the contract amendment is ready and prepared and ready for adoption by the board, the AVEC board would need to agree to a 3.95% participation share, approval of a funding agreement for the $12,172,096 over the 4 years, approve an amendment to the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, approve the notice of exemption, and approve the voting procedures for the Class 8 representatives to the DCA board. Those are the 4 items that are contained in the resolution in the board order that would adopt that resolution and the MOU. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any particular matters that the board members may have.
Any questions? Well, you must have done a great job explaining that, Dwayne. A lot of information.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve resolution number R-20-23. This is Keith.
Do we have a second?
I'll second this, Frank.
Okay, one last chance. Any questions? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Ellie Sorsable.
Yes. Okay, resolution number R-20-23 passes. Thank you very much, everyone. Item number 9, we have no old business. Number 10, general manager's report.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, this is General Manager's report for November 24, 2020. You can see that we have a fairly clear northern Sierra area as far as weather goes. In the Wednesday, looks like we're going to get put some potential for some snow down to 4,000 feet. But there again, it's going to rise up again closer to 9,000 feet later. And I want to make sure that I'll go over this many times, but this region in here is where all the rainfall and the snowfall comes into Lake Orville and is the source of the water that is imported to Southern California. This graph here shows you where we are at this particular point in November. So normally we would anticipate about 6.6 inches on average. We're about half of that at 3.5. We did have some snow and rainfall a couple of weeks ago, but nothing sizable. These numbers in December, January, and February, and March are critical, and this is where we'll get an increase in our allocations once we get some weather in this particular area. So that's why we look at this chart so frequently. This is the typical average chart that goes over all of the rainfall, and you can see we're pretty low on that chart early in the year. As far as the reservoir conditions, primarily in both Lake Orville and San Luis, you can see we're about 38% of our total capacity. Historically, we've been closer to 63%. So, in essence, we're ready for a good atmospheric river to occur in the general area, and because we've got plenty of storage available. And you can see from San Luis that we've drafted down below our average number, and just a little under 1 million available in the reservoir there for delivery during this period. And I'll move forward with this. You can see the same thing. We're very early in the year, and you can see where we are with regards to our San Luis conditions. Closer to home, conventional treatment, you can see we're down considerably from our peaks. We're about 19 million gallons a day flowing out of our treatment plants. As far as our west side water bank, you can see that we're in the east side water bank in total. We're looking at approximately 3.9 to 3.1 million gallons a day. In addition, we're not doing any water banking at the present time. And this graph here is an indicator that we got 91,703 acre feet available for us to deliver in a particular drought, and especially once we get our SNP line built in a couple of years. You can see this is the actual versus the actual deliveries versus requested deliveries from our customers. And you can see we had a real low dip here in the summertime period, but you can see September and October, they're taking approximately what they had anticipated requests for. As far as water quality goes, we did our annual sampling, and everything's looking really good as far as our meeting all of our state and federal standards. We started our winter maintenance programs. We do have Calgon here at Quartz Hill. They're working to change out the GAC filter media. And also we have SPOE contractors out doing some turnout repairs for various customers over the next several weeks. SNP Phase 2 wind grant application. Wanted to let the board know that we had the Congressman Mike Garcia was here and toured on 11/12/20, and he gave us a considerable amount of recommendations with regards to our application. Staff and Public Towns and Affairs prepared a supplemental information to send off to the Bureau of Reclamation, incorporating all the recommendations that Congressman Garcia provided us. And so that's, we got confirmation that the that the Bureau of Reclamation had received it. And it's also Congressman Garcia's office has a copy of that for their follow-up. As far as COVID goes, we're continuing to implement all of our protocols, and we have no new confirmed cases, and we haven't had any confirmed cases during this pandemic here at Avek. As far as the events and schedules go, we got Thanksgiving this weekend, or this week. We got a special Water Master meeting on the 2nd of December, and then we also have the Aqua Virtual Fall Conference on the 2nd and 3rd. My schedule, I'll be out tomorrow at a doctor appointment tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll be here the balance of the next 2-week period before the next board meeting. So be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dwayne. Item number 11, Director's Reports. Do you have any directors that want to report anything? Okay, item 12, Attorney Report. Mr. Markin?
I have a report, but it really pertains to the closed session item A, if that's happening at this meeting. If not, it can wait, but I do have a report on the Phelan Pinion Hills oral argument appeal, which was the first one up in the Antelope Valley case, and I could report on the status of the other appeals coming down the line, the committee I'm working on Willis. But that would have to be in closed session if you're going in anyway. If not, that can wait till next month.
I think we are. Thank you. Any requests for any future agenda items from any of the board members? Okay, next would be closed session. Do we have a reason to go into closed session?
Yes, we do for item A and B.
Okay. All right. Well, we will adjourn to closed session. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Director Miller. I'll motion to adjourn to closed session.
This is Rob. I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Justin Lane,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Shelley Sorsican.
Yes. So if the directors will stay on the line, Holly will put us into a meeting room. Is that correct?
That is correct. Hang on.
Don't leave us behind, Holly.
Well, of course. Sorry.